Hey friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. I'm in a new location today because it is officially dreary, cold, gray, dark Oregon weather and there's zero light in my house. I have one west-facing window that I can sit in front of, so this is the setup and it's not bad. I have my heated blanket because it's so cold. But let's talk books. Today I'm going to wrap up the books that I read and finished in October. I have 18 books to talk about, 17 I read and 1 I DNF'd. So there's quite a lot to cover and I organized them to the best of my ability. I'm going to briefly mention the 3 books that I did for a 5-star prediction video with Lindsay and Sarah for Booklist Thursday. I'm not going to go into detail on these books because I have a whole separate video where I talk about these books in detail and how they turned out. I will say that none of these 3 were 5 stars, but it was a fun experiment. Next, let me talk about the one classic that I read in October, and that is The Fortnight in September. I actually started this in September on my trip in the UK. I thought it was the perfect read, perfect pairing for my time in the UK because this is about a 2-week family vacation on the coast of England, and I went on a 2-week vacation with my husband to England. I wasn't able to finish it in September because I just never found myself gravitating towards it, and it kept dragging on, but I'm a completionist. I have a hard time DNFing books, and I power through, and I probably shouldn't have. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. It was just ultimately so boring. Nothing happened. There was zero plot. It was just the detailed minutia of this family going on a trip. I think, you know, they're supposed to be all like quirky and a funny little family, and it's mostly the perspective of the father that's kind of like the head of the family that's making a lot of decisions, and he has all these thoughts and anxieties about the trip. But it was just so boring. I didn't find myself drawn to any characters, and there was no plot. Nothing happened at all. And it wasn't even aided by like interesting atmosphere or like a good sense of place. It just lacked a lot for me, and unfortunately it wasn't a successful classic read. It was originally published in 1931. I imagine that this maybe worked for some people as like a little escapist novel, or maybe even a kind of relatable diary entry almost of this family going on a trip, but nothing happened, and I just feel like it didn't hold up for me as like a classic. It didn't feel like worth reading. I didn't have any takeaways from it, but maybe I was missing a point. I'm not sure. Could work for some, didn't work for me. All right, next, let me touch on the picture book that I picked up this month. It was called The Leaf Thief. It was totally on a whim at my library where I was working, and I wasn't able to take it home because it had a bunch of holds on it because it was a very autumnal book, and it was so sweet and so fun and really cute. It reminded me a lot of Mel Fell, which was a picture book that I read in April or May of this year, and I really loved. Very humorous, light, just this fun little squirrel who's obsessed with his leaves and thinks someone is stealing his leaves, but it's actually just fall and the wind taking the leaves away, and it was very sweet and fun. Now for some graphic novels that I actually read on Halloween. Both of these I read on October 31st. I'm going to talk about Sheets first. This is a young adult graphic novel that I've seen make its rounds on BookTube, but I never had any desire to pick it up because I don't really care about ghost stories. I'm just so not like a ghost paranormal person at all. But I picked this up on a whim because I think I saw Lovely Day with Holly read the second book on Goodreads, and I had time at the library and our library had a copy, and I was like, I should just pick this up. Why not? It's Halloween. And it was fine. It wasn't anything special for me, and I should have known that because I don't again care or love ghost stories very much. This is about a young girl dealing with grief from the loss of her mom. Her dad is struggling, an alcoholic, and she's trying to run this family laundromat and trying to stay in business, but then there's this like evil guy who's trying to take over her business, and at the same time there's this whole world of ghosts that live and that wear sheets, and this one little ghost comes to her laundromat and they become friends at the end, and everything ties up very nicely. It was sweet and light. I really love the illustration style a lot. The storyline was fine. Another graphic novel that I picked up thematically fit well for this spooky season, that is Beautiful Darkness. This is a translated graphic novel, I believe originally from German, and I would say this book is for fans of Into the Woods or Through the Woods, that really dark, creepy graphic novel that I read earlier this year that was way too nasty and dark for me. This is in a very similar level. It's seemingly sweet, the illustrations are cute, but at the heart of the story it is the most disturbing, and I'm just not a fan of that. I don't like being scared. I'm a wimp. I don't like reading creepy things at all. I like reading some suspense and I can handle that, but I can't handle like actual disturbing, almost kind of like gore stuff. For fans of spooky things and creepiness, I would say this probably would work great for you, but it was way too dark for me. I just could not handle it. That was a 1-star read for me. I was just like, no. The next category of books that I'll talk about here is nonfiction. I think, like I mentioned, in September, this is kind of the time of year where I really pick up on my nonfiction reading. I read nonfiction all throughout the year, but I'm just more in the mood for it now. The first book that I'll talk about is Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. This is a new release celebrity memoir by the actor who played Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter film franchise. I don't read too many celebrity memoirs, but I will read the ones that I'm a fan of. I don't necessarily am a fan of Tom Felton per se. I haven't followed his career or him as an actor. I just know him from his one role in Harry Potter, and I'm a big Harry Potter fan of the books and the films. I just thought it would be fun to get a little behind the scenes look at the Harry Potter world, which is what this book kind of promised, but it was more than that. It was about his childhood, his upbringing, his family, how he got into the business, of course his experience filming on the Harry Potter sets, and then it chronicled his move to LA and some serious stuff that he experienced there with addiction and rehab and finding his place in the world after such a big movie experience. And it was good. It was exactly what it is, but it wasn't anything extra or exciting or particularly well written or any kind of wow. If you are a fan of the Harry Potter films, I would say this works for you. If you're at all interested in acting biz maybe and like what life actually is like and maybe some reflections on that experience, this could also be the book for you. But just like a standalone memoir that I would widely recommend to many people, this is not it. This is just for that group of people that are interested in that. It was well done. I think I landed on like 3.5 stars. The next 2 books I read were also memoirs written by the same person, and I really didn't need to read the second one, but I'm a completionist. But anyways, the books I'm talking about is A Stolen Life and Freedom by J.C. Dugard. This is her recounting her experience of being abducted. J.C. Dugard was 11 years old when she was kidnapped and kept in captivity for 18 years by a mentally deranged, psychopathic, schizophrenic child rapist, pedophile, a horrible man that did horrible things to her, and she recounts her story. A Stolen Life is more about her time in captivity, and Freedom, my book of verse, is about her time afterwards. Now, what I'll say about this book, it was not well written, but I cannot fault that because the author chose to write this book herself to tell her story. But there is like a stuntedness. Even though she wrote this in her 30s, she writes and sounds like a 11-year-old girl, and her whole book is written from that little girl's perspective, even though she was 29 when she was rescued. And again, I do not dare blame her or fault her for that, but I kind of fault the editors. I feel like there's a way to tell your story, but then also maybe have someone who is good at writing write it for you or help you in some way. But it just was very much sporadic, timeline jumps, random reflections throughout, diary entries that she actually wrote down while she was in captivity. But the heart of the story is absolutely tragic and brutal, and I will say this was one of the hardest things I've read. From the chapters that she describes how he raped her and the detail of her sexual assault was so disturbing. One of the hardest things I've ever read in my life, because it's just pure like evil, horrible, 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 and that was really hard to read. So these books, I'm glad that I read them. It made me do a big internet deep dive into her story, her life. I watched some interviews with her that she did with Barbara Walters, I think, and like Oprah, and it is beautiful that she's telling her story and that she is so positive and hopeful even amongst this tragedy that she went through. But these are not well-written books, especially this second one I liked even less, and I really didn't need to read it. But again, I'm a completionist, so I felt like I had to read the pair. Yeah, I'm glad I read these books. I guess overall, no total regrets, but they are not well-written memoirs. So don't pick them up if you're looking for that, and just know that they are very hard reads. The next nonfiction that didn't totally work for me is Wave. In 2004, a devastating tsunami hit the coast of Sri Lanka, and this story is about this woman's experience losing her entire family, her husband, her 2 sons, her parents, and some other family friends. She's the only one that survived from her group of people. Really, this is her, I think, like therapy to try to work through her grief. It could have been so powerful and well done, but I really did not like the writing style in this book. It was so jumpy and random. I didn't have a chance to connect with who this family was before she just jumped into the tsunami and what happened, and then just dealing with grief. I feel like I didn't get a chance to know her, her family, or what she lost. It was just musings, ramblings, thoughts on grief, mostly non-hopeful, quite suicidal. She wanted to end her life. She hated everything. And it took many, many years before she even had any kind of light. And even then it just ends. There really was no exploration in growth or reaching some kind of resolution, I guess. It was just sitting with the author in her grief. I feel like I didn't feel the weightiness and the heaviness of that loss with her. Ultimately, I just feel like she was very angry, again, rightfully so, but that was sort of it. And then my last nonfiction I have to talk about was an excellent read. It was a 5-star read. I started this in July with my husband. We were reading a few chapters, a few pages a day, and that book was Bumpin', The Modern Guide to Pregnancy by Leslie Schrock. Now, this is not a low-key pregnancy announcement. My husband and I are just big planners and preppers for certain things, and this is like a really huge thing that someone would go through in their life, and so I feel like I'm starting the process early of just getting a foundational understanding of this experience that a woman would go through in her life. And so even though I do not have my own experience to compare to the accuracy of what this author is describing, I thought that this was a fantastic read, like the perfect book, because it not only covered so much information and covered it really well, and scientifically she included research studies and history and background, but you could really hear the author's voice and story throughout it all. She told her personal birth story, but also you can find her humor and voice throughout all of the paragraphs of this information overload, and I really love that. A lot of great information, but wasn't lacking the personality. You know, it wasn't just like a dry nonfiction, here are facts, and really anyone could have wrote it. I feel like I got to know the author a bit, and also just a fantastic resource. The next stack of books that I'll talk about is sci-fi. I'm gonna mention my DNF, and that was Elsewhere. This is a new release that I originally picked up because of the stunning cover. Sorry about the glare, but I could not get into this. I think I got about 30% of the way through of this book, but I found the storytelling too strange, too ambiguous and weird, and this is a lot more literary fiction than I think science fiction, but I just got distracted by the fluffy lyrical language and description of things, and without actually getting to know the characters. And as far as I got, it's just this tiny little community that lives elsewhere, and all of the mothers, after they give birth at a certain time, disappear. And I'm assuming we discover the mystery of what is happening to these mothers, and it's this like creepy eeriness going on, but I just could not get into it. I was so not feeling this audiobook at all and this story, so I DNF'd it. Another book that I really did not vibe with, but I didn't DNF, was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is a book that's been on my TBR for ages, and so it felt like the perfect time of year to read this. And this is really like a modern classic, I think, at this point. Post-apocalyptic world where a man and his son are on the road, and all we know is something happened, and there are like cannibal, like weird people around, I think, murdering and eating people, and you have to stay away from evil people, and there's people who are like deranged on the road, and his father is just protecting his son. It's a very short book. Actually, I listened to the audiobook and it was only like 6 hours. I think the shortness of it was a detriment to me because I did not have time to connect to these characters. When it comes to post-apocalyptic sci-fi, I need to know details. I don't like the ambiguous pandemic-y books. Like, that's why I didn't connect with Severance by Ling Ma, because it was too vague. Here as well, we weren't given enough details of what actually happened to people and what happened to the world. And so this book just kind of flew by, and it was sort of like in one ear out the other, and it wasn't memorable or a standout to me. My husband and I also finished Catching Fire, which is book 2 in the Hunger Games series, and so we have Mockingjay and The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes left. We'll see if those get finished this year. I guess I should say this is a reread for me. I've read this whole series before. I really enjoyed them before, and in rereading them, I feel the same way. They are fun. They're not amazing to me. They're not like 5-star, the best series ever. They progressively also, I think, get worse. Like, the first book was fantastic, and this was a solid 4, and I think the third book is gonna be okay, wraps up the series. But yeah, they're still fun. It's fun to be in this world again. And speaking of young adult, in the month of October, I picked up Wolf by Wolf and Blood for Blood by Ryan Groden. This is a duology, technically sci-fi, although this read more like historical because this is an alternate history type of world that we're in. I'll hold up the first book because the second book was just a continuation of this book. So in this world, the Nazi Party, the Third Reich, won the war and took over most of Europe. And the main perspective is from a young Jewish girl that was in a concentration camp that had experiments done on her and she turned into a skin shifter. So she's able to change her appearance. That is like the little fantastical element of this book. And so she's able to escape from her concentration camp and join the resistance. And then her mission is to kill Hitler. And then some stuff goes down. And then this book continues the story. I will say this book feels a lot more brutal and heavy than this book was, but I thought that these were really well done, really well written. I understand the hype. They weren't, again, amazing 5-star reads for me. They were 4-star books. They weren't too young adult either. There was a little bit of romance, but it wasn't like over the top, and overall just a very unique read. I realized I really like alternate history because it is sci-fi technically, but it reads like historical fiction. So I like that kind of combination. I really love the Man in the High Castle TV series. I haven't read the book. I heard the book was not great, but I'm really interested in more alternate history. So if you have any recommendations for alternate history books or series or whatever, let me know, because my interest is now piqued and I feel like this could be my ultimate sweet spot with sci-fi. And then finally, let me talk about a beloved book by many. That is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. The hype kind of got me. To be honest, had zero interest ever reading this. I am not a Shakespeare girl. I just am way too stupid to understand Shakespeare. I didn't really love it in school. I have just no desire now as like an adult reader to read Shakespeare. I'm not like against trying it, but I'm just not interested in it. I don't think I'm gonna have a good time. When I heard about this book, I think last year or the year before, it was like Shakespeare's family. Ooh, we have a lot of geese flying above us. You could probably hear that. They're migrating, you know? Anyways, so when I first heard about this book and it being about Shakespeare and his family, I was like, I just don't care. But then for some reason it was still always in the background because so many people were loving it and just singing its praises. The audiobook became available and I read it this month. When I finished reading it, I gave it 3 stars. In hindsight, I've been thinking about this book and it is beautiful and uniquely written. So maybe it's closer to 4-star in my mind. I completely understand why people love this book. And I think for the same reasons it is beautiful for those people. It wasn't as amazing for me. It pulled me out of the story because this book is very time jumpy as well and jumps from character to character within like a paragraph. Like you'll be reading one paragraph and then the perspective just shifts to a different person. And I feel like it took me a while to get into. When I first started reading it, I was like, ooh, this is not gonna be for me. This book sat at 2 stars for a while. And then as I got into the story a little bit more, it moved up slowly but surely. This book is ultimately about grief and a mother losing her son. It is about the bubonic plague and people dying. Really the core of the story is Shakespeare family, but more so it is about his wife, Agnes, her story, her upbringing, her being a mother, her relating to her children and relating to her husband and relating to her in-laws and living during this time period. And this book was very atmospheric and I think gave me an interesting, unique understanding of maybe the bubonic plague and maybe what someone was going through during that time period. It felt a little bit to me like overly pretentious lyrical writing just for the sake of it. And so yeah, maybe that's why it wasn't as amazing to me, but I can completely understand why this book is so amazing for other people. So those are all of the books that I got to reading in October. I think just my theme is I haven't been finding amazing reads. You know, some of these are 4 stars. My one pregnancy book was 5 stars, but I haven't had that many like amazing reads. And like I mentioned in my 5-star prediction follow-up, I really need some 5-star reads. And I think November is gonna be the month. I feel like November is gonna be a fantastic reading month. I have a big, very ambitious TBR with Nonfiction November and Historathon. Fingers crossed that I'm gonna get a higher average rating because I feel like there's just been a lot of meh books and I need to find some good ones. As always, let me know your thoughts below. If you've read any of these books, if you have anything to say, if you have any alternate history recommendations, leave them in the comments for me. I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video soon. Bye.